we made it. We are almost at the end of the second day of DevFest. We still have some funny things and some serious things and some party things, but we made it through the technical talks, almost. So Max stole a little bit of my thunder. I wanted to talk about my journey and how I got to Verily. So as Max said, Verily Life Sciences, it's an alphabet company, for those of you that don't know, so it's Google adjacent. And I've only been there about 5 months, and I'm working on a product that involves hardware, so some embedded code. I'm writing firmware, as well as mobile apps that connect over BLE to this firmware. But before that, I worked on Firebase at Google, including crash reporting and Fastlane. Folks might know that tool as well. And my journey to Google was interesting. I came in through an acquisition of Fabric, which is another tool that mobile developers might be familiar with. And my journey there, we were part of Twitter. Also very interesting. I came in through the acquisition of Crashlytics. And so really haven't interviewed for a job in a long time. I just keep getting taken wherever the train goes. But it's been a really exciting journey. And so as I said, I recently transferred to Verily, where I'm working on a consumer product. It's for the first time in my life that my customer is not a cranky developer like me. This is a new thing for me. So let's get going. So question. Would your customers, whether they're cranky developers or consumers of your product, would they rather get one complete thing or 3 half-done things? When I say half-done, I mean 3 buttons that go nowhere or 3 screens in your app that you can't get to. It's, I think, an obvious answer. They'd rather get one thing that's done. And as a developer, would you rather give them one complete thing or 3 half-done things that you're not proud of? Right? Pretty simple. But we can answer these questions and come up with the same answer. But this isn't how teams are set up for success. This is not how product managers or engineering managers think about how teams should do work and how apps and other software should be built. So let's see if we can convince ourselves and everyone else that all we want to deliver is one complete feature. So the goal of my talk today is to uncover ways that you and your team can launch an app and continue to deliver features iteratively, time and time again, to your customers. I'll talk about how you can actually innovate in the product space without waiting forever for your first launch, and the processes that teams can use to get there. And then I'll focus on a few of my favorite tools, and they're probably my favorite tools because I worked on most of them. But a few tools that you can use to get there. And I'll finish up by discussing something called the progress principle for making happy workers, and ways to build products that make happy customers. So I tried for a while to come up with a diagram that really was my entire presentation in one slide. And I got there, but unfortunately it looks like this eyeball that's staring at you, and I apologize. If you didn't see it before, now you will. It's just going to be staring at you the whole time. The outer ring, the biggest circle, is thinking about product. There's so much foundational work that goes into making the right product. If you work on a bigger team, it's easy to say that this is the work of a product manager. I'm a developer. I'm not in charge of what we build, just building it. But I don't think that's true. We all want to make the right thing, make things that customers love, that they want to use. So the next circle in focuses on the people doing the work, us, the team, how we're set up for success. In the middle, the tiniest circle is the actual tools that are used to build the app this way. And I think that the specific tools are not actually that important, just how and why. And that's why it's the smallest circle, the tiniest piece of the puzzle. So let's talk about the process of actually launching something for the first time. Getting to V1 is so hard, right? It's hard because it feels impossible. There's so many unexpected complications that come along. And if you want to ship on some timeline, you have to make cuts. You have to say, nope, that can't make it, that can't make it. And by the end, you're wondering, is this still valuable? Do people even like this? It's taken me so long to make it. Is it what they want? now. Maybe it was what they wanted when I started, but is it what they want a year later? And when you're in it, when you're in this place as a developer, you can't even see V1. It's so far away from you. Tom Stannis, who's the head of software at Verily, calls a V1 launch an event horizon. Right? You get so hard to see anything else beyond this. But it's big. And when we get there, we have some strong foundation to build off of. So the idea of doing a launch is daunting. I keep saying this. We try to line up all of the features for one date in the calendar for one big bang. But that isn't how software is built. Our friends working on the web, they get to ship multiple times a day if they want to. Can we be that lucky? I don't know. But when we launch, we can keep doing it again and again. And now's the time where we groan and complain about how long it takes to make an app release and get it out there to our customers, whether it's through App Store or Google Play. But we're lucky because we actually get to do multiple releases of the same product. And I say that we're lucky because I mentioned that the other part of what I work on is hardware, right? If those folks, you know, they get one shot at electrical and mechanical engineering. It has to be perfect. It has to be right to go out the door and then over the fence. Maybe you get some over-the-air firmware updates if you're lucky, and that's happening with more and more IoT devices. But that's certainly not the reality for everyone. The product I'm working on, when it goes out, it's going to be flashed with that firmware, and that's it. We get one shot. So let's think about making the process of launching easier because we can, because we're lucky enough to get to do that. So how do we set up a team to be successful in this way? So I'm going to talk about Kanban and Lean, which are some processes that I've worked with in the past that make a lot of sense to me. And really the point is to get teams to focus on doing one thing and doing it well to deliver something to customers instead of a bunch of half-done nothing. So these are the main concepts behind Kanban and Lean. What I like about these is that they apply to lots of kinds of engineering. They actually have roots in manufacturing. And they're not prescriptive. They're just a set of principles. So what does it mean to visualize the work? It can mean anything for your team. A lot of people think about a Kanban board, but that's not the only way to visualize work. A spreadsheet visualizes work. Anything can visualize work. And the same thing for making policies explicit. What does that mean for your team? On my teams in the past, it's meant making a working agreement. We document how we go about doing things. We document what's more important, code reviews or code in progress. For us, code reviews are most important things. They interrupt other developers' work. Why? Because if your code is ready for review, it's that much closer to done, and it's that much closer to delivering something to a customer, to your end user, to make them happy. My half-done feature that I'm still working on and I can't get things in the right place and the clicking doesn't work, that's not close enough. It's not on its way to the customer, but things in code review are. So making policies explicit, whatever they are, write them down and follow them. Evolving through experimentation can mean many different things. It can be in your product, but it can also be in your team process. And for us, that meant every week having a retrospective on Fridays where we talked about the week and we were able to iterate on our process, change it every week. What's something we want to experiment with? What went well? What didn't go well, and how can we change it? So some of the ones that are most meaningful to me is a set of both. Eliminating waste means taking things that are partially done. Like I said, that code that I'm half done with, that could be waste. Or time spent waiting is a huge source of waste. As developers, what are things we wait for? Code reviews, CI, App Store reviews. If we can eliminate as many of those waiting periods as possible, we can get things done faster. Limiting the work in progress, and to me, the limit is some number less than the number of developers on the team. So if you have 5 people on the team, 4, 3, the number of things that should be in progress at any given time. And what that does is it shows you where all this waste is. It shows you where people are waiting for things and allows you to find those and fix them so that you can go faster. Delivering as fast as possible, that's really the entire reason I'm giving this talk. So I think it sort of explains itself. But feedback loops with your users and evolving your product through experimentation mean that you build the right thing. And building integrity in, that's taking time to test and monitor your app, which means it will have high quality. So we imagine a world where we have 5 features that we've set up for our next big release, and we want to get them all done. These are all super important, and we think our customers are going to love every one of them. You line each feature up with each developer on your team, and after some period of time, a week, whatever your sprint length is, you've gotten some stuff done, right? Some progress towards each one of them. But you keep going at this pace, it's going to take a while until everything's done, and you're ready to ship the whole thing with all of the bugs that you've built in the meantime. But what if, instead, you lined up all of the developers on the team behind one single thing on the same feature, and you divided it into small, parallelizable features where you could have people working on it at the same time. And you could deliver something to your customers much sooner than everything. You get feedback on it sooner. You'd find the bugs sooner. And while instead of developers waiting on each other, you find the waste in the system. You take the time to tackle tech debt that's in this area or write missing tests so you can build that quality in. If we waited till everything was done, we'd have all this waste of features that were committed, that were in master, but had been delivered to no one yet. OK, so that's the process. What are the tools? So I think they're a small piece of the puzzle, but giving people ideas of things that they can go and look at, to whether or not you use these specific tools, should be really meaningful. So I'm going to cover using something like Fastlane to improve your CI process so that doing a release can be frictionless. No waiting for CI, and that's eliminating waste. I'll talk about what I call slowing your roll. It's like getting things out to customers slowly, some percentage of them, using or alpha or beta channels to build feedback loops, to learn how the product that you're shipping at this time is meaningful or used or unused by your customers. Talk about testing, just a little bit, to build integrity into your product. And finally, about metrics, so that you can evolve through experimentation. So something that sucks to hear is somebody's out of the office this week. We can't do the release. We gotta wait. And it might be because I have the keys on my machine, or I'm the only one with the password to that account, or some other silly reason. But it's sad to say I've been there, and recently too. It's something that happens to many of us. So shipping a release should be as easy as the one big red button. So Fastlane is an open source tool set focused on release automation. It can help you make that dream a reality. So you can automate every aspect of your development and release process with this. You can capture screenshots that are localized to every language that your app supports automatically for the stores. Configure it once, and you store the configuration in source control so that anybody, or at best your CI system, can do this for you. And it can also help you automate the most time-intensive processes of doing a beta or a prod release, just like bumping the build version, code signing, actually building and uploading the app somewhere, setting up a changelog. And it supports all the different beta testing services that folks use. So this is what configuration looks like for doing a beta and prod release. What's missing are some passwords and things like that that are stored in environment variables. But it can be this easy. To do a beta release, bump the version number, build your app, whether that's through an Xcode build command or through Gradle, upload it to test flight or to play beta. Do an app store release. Same thing, get your screenshots ready, build your app, upload it, and even announce in your Slack channel that your release has gone out. I want to talk about testing a little bit. Testing is important. This isn't a talk about testing, though. There are many people who are much more qualified to talk about writing good tests. I just want to talk about running the tests. So you can run them on a physical device. You can run them on an emulator. You can run them through CI. You can test your changes on users and production. But you somehow must test the changes in order for this iterative development cycle to work. You have to learn something from your tests. Earlier, Valera from Slack gave a great talk about their testing automation, performance testing automation pipeline, which is really cool. But if you're not there, if you're not at the level where you can dedicate a lot of engineering effort to building tools like this internally, you must find some other way. Git hooks are one way to enforce that people write the tests. Now, you can do similar things with GitHub, but not everyone uses GitHub, right? This little script ensures that code doesn't leave my machine if the tests don't pass. Who's broken master before? Nobody? Yeah, I see some hands. Some of us have broken master before because we're stupid and we didn't run the tests. All right? Maybe your CI system's not the best. It'll only run things after they get to master to let you know that things are broken, right? This is something that I use. So absolutely, I have to run the test before they leave my machine. And in this case, we're using a mono repo, so we have the firmware in the same repository. And this script will only run the iOS tests if iOS code has changed. So, and then it'll fail the commit or the push wherever you've hooked this to. Firebase Test Lab is another way to test your app. You can test Android apps and iOS apps using UI tests. And you can run them on real devices, devices that we don't all have in our in-house device farm. Right? Who's built a tiny little test lab rig with lots of wires and devices sitting on tables? I see some hands, right? I made one of those too. We don't have to. We can use tools, people who are better at it than us, to accomplish these things. And Test Lab can fit in with your workflow processes that you already have in place. You can drag your built binary into the web console if that's what works for you, if you build on your machine, or you can hook it up to CI. You get to run on many different kinds of devices, and some of the other information that you get from running tests are screenshots, videos of your app in action, crashes, logs from your app. There's even something called the Robo Crawler that will go and walk around your app clicking on buttons and taking screenshots all the while. So it's a great way to test your app. So you can test in beta, right? You can use beta testing on a small group of people. These might be your friends and family. These might be everybody in your company. Someone who's agreed to get an early version of your app. And they can give you feedback because they're people that you have some kind of relationship with. You can use TestFlight and Google Play to send out early releases. And like I said, these can be trusted testers, folks that you've found on the internet who are super excited about testing an early version of your app and will give you great feedback. Or you can force it on your friends and family or your boss or anybody else through tools like I said, TestFlight, Google Play, Crashlytics, Beta, and Hockey App. You can test on your users in production. You can use staged rollouts to roll out the next version of your app a few percentage at a time and make sure it's OK before continuing on with the rest of your release. Phased rollouts and staged rollouts are both supported by App Store Connect and Google Play Console. And you can drag things in and click buttons, or you can automate it with Fastlane if you're there. Firebase remote config is another great way to test on your users in production without having to wait for a build to upload. You can make changes to your app's default behavior by changing parameters on the server side, as long as you've planned ahead and instrumented your app with these. And just as you can turn features on for a few percentage or a few people, you can turn them off when things get ugly. You didn't plan for something, and if it's gone horrible, switch it off. So here's an example of some remote config parameters that I built. Can we read that? Yeah. So the top one, it'll change the home screen text, something different, for just 10% of your iOS users. See how they react to it. You can use A/B testing through Firebase as well to look at the metrics to see how the analytics differ. Are people who have this awesome text, are they buying more? Are they staying longer in your app? Do they have some different behavior? And this is how the conditions are configured. Not as readable. You can have all these different percentage flags that you can start to turn on. You can have just all of your Android users. If you're using user properties through Firebase, you can set all sorts of things that some information about people in your app. People who buy things, you can test on only the people who make purchases. See if they react differently to this, or turn on this feature only for people who have done something in the last 30 days. The app side code is probably what you'd expect. Just get a value from an SDK that you've installed and wrap it around 2 different code branches in your app. So most developers probably already use tools for crash reporting and for analytics. But I want to call these out as being very important when you're trying to make iterative changes, because this is how you're going to tell if people are still using your app, if your app is crashy after these changes. If you care about how users are impacted, you've got to know some way. So either your friends and family run over with their broken app and put it in your face, or you've got to look at the metrics to know what's really happening. So I talked about some tools that you can use. But I want to talk about the team. So start zooming back out in that picture. So when we think about progress, we imagine something that feels good when we get something done. A lot of times we think about something big, right? The V1 launch, the major breakthrough. And these big wins feel awesome, right? Celebrate our success. But they're rare. We're not doing that every day. We're not shipping a V1 launch every single day. The good news is that small wins can increase people's happiness tremendously. So Teresa Immobile and Stephen Kramer wrote a really great book called The Progress Principle. And in it, they talk about studies that they did where they asked people to journal, to write things that happened every day, and what days were they happiest. And it wasn't the days when they had success that they were the happiest. It was the days when they made progress, when they were able to get something done, is when they were the happiest. If we can use tools like the ones that I've discussed, I think we can use the power of small wins to boost people's happiness. Making just a little bit of progress will make your development team happier because they're getting something to their customers sooner and making more things that people love. So we talked about the team. They couldn't see the top. They couldn't see how far they wanted to get. So we must be wondering, is there something we can do for these folks to make them feel like they're making progress? And I think by creating a series of achievable milestones within this big launch, the team happiness will be boosted when they get to each of them. The work that they do on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis will make sense towards the next immediate milestone, rather than shooting for something that's so far off in the distance that they can't see it. And the progress that they make each day or each week will help them be happier and work harder and smarter because they're actually making that progress every time. So do you think about it like this? If you could have a happy hour or go to a little party every Friday, that'd feel pretty awesome. And I'd rather do that than go to one big rager or bash at the end of the year that I probably wouldn't even remember anyway, right? The effect would wear off so quickly. I'd rather have continual little pieces of happiness throughout my life. So we talked about tools that can eliminate waste and increase team happiness and velocity at the same time. And that last little piece of the puzzle, the reason that we're all here, though, is the customer. Without a happy customer or users, we probably wouldn't have jobs. Most of us are not in the business of making products or software for ourselves, right? We serve someone. So in the book, The Lean Startup by Eric Rice, he talks about this build, measure, learn cycle. That's generally thought of as iteration based on learning stuff from your customers. And this means that we think, we're at the base of the mountain. We think we know what that V1 is going to look like now. But that's totally going to change if we do this iteratively and we get feedback from customers. We don't know what it's going to be yet, but if we're nimble enough and meet that change, we can actually build the right thing the first time. So at each phase of building, there's something that we can learn and something we can measure. When we're building and testing as developers, we can measure the quality of the app and decide if we're proud of it or not, or if maybe we should return to building and try something else. When we're doing usability or beta testing, we can learn about the emotions of our users and decide if we've designed it correctly or if we need to go back and rethink the user experience. And when we've shipped the app, we can learn through metrics, as I said before, if people are using particular features as much as we thought. Did we spend all this time building something for no one to use it? And if we're retaining enough customers. After this last release, people just keep leaving. I wonder if it's something that we did. So we can use that information that we learned through all of these cycles together with whatever our plans are for the next release to decide what's actually the most important thing. Maybe a shiny new feature that we were going to work on isn't all that important now that we've learned that a bunch of our customers are no longer making purchases where we thought they were. And the best thing about software is that you can update it every month or every day. And what that means, to me, is that it's better to ship a minimum viable product and learn how to use it and learn how people use it and what they're enjoying most about it rather than try to predict it. So author of the book Lean from the Trenches, Henrik Nyberg, sort of described this metaphorically, right? If you're going to set out to build a car, you don't ship a customer one wheel at a time. What are they going to do with that? Unless they build a one-wheel skateboard thing, right? That's a one-car wheel. One tire is not useful to people. But if you delivered something small, right, the skateboard and then the scooter and then the bicycle, right? If you delivered something small that serves a purpose every time, rather than just a piece of a thing that someone can't use, you'll have something that's useful at all stages. You'll learn what people actually want, right? You set out to build a hard top. Turns out people love the feel of the wind blowing through your hair riding your motorcycle, and you ended up building a convertible instead. You built the right thing the first time for your customers. So a final word about software launches. I believe it's a fundamental truth that they can either be date-driven or software-driven, but not both. And when developers are empowered, you get to decide when the right time to ship is. If you prepare for a huge release with lots of presents on December 24th, and you miss, is it still Christmas when you get around to delivering it? When you finally get it out the door? Or would it have been better to deliver one simple gift on that night, on that evening, to make Christmas? It's yours to decide. I think you probably all know how I feel, but you can make the choice. As developers, when you're empowered, you make the decision. So I hope you enjoyed some of the philosophy and specific tooling that I talked about. I think if you use the right tools and processes to make teams successful, you're ultimately going to make your customers much happier. Thank you.